In fact, my call out is for all investors saying, hey, look, instead of each of you trying to solve this, shouldn't you pool in all of you, the investee companies, come together, work with someone who has the ability to design, build a co-located plant, and each of you use 25% of that space, and then go and build out larger capacities. Unless we come together to solve this problem, like we did during COVID, this is going to fail. I think COVID is a great example. If we need future resilient food sources, fermentation is the way. If you want to do that, we'll have to cross pollinate ideas and bring this together for successful large scale manufacturing. Smart proteins will work, customers will buy. Price point is what is stopping them. And the shift will happen suddenly, and it's not going to be gradual.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Smart Protein Pod by GFIdeas India, a podcast designed to educate and guide entrepreneurs, students, researchers, and early career professionals in the smart protein sector. We do this by inviting pioneers and trailblazers in science, business, government, and civil society who have shown exceptional vision for the future of our food system. I am Fathima Beevi, Industry Engagement Associate at Good Food Institute India, and your host for this episode. For those new here, GFIdeas India is a community started by GFI India for innovators creating or expanding access to smart protein solutions and working to advance the ecosystem in India. Working alongside scientists, business, and policymakers, GFI India's team focuses on making alternate proteins delicious, affordable, and accessible. Today's guest is someone who has spent the last 2 decades at the cutting edge of biotechnology, exploring innovative solutions, and pushing the boundaries in the field. There is a quote that goes, the reasonable person adapts themselves to the world, the unreasonable one persists in trying to adapt the world to themselves. Therefore, all progress depends on unreasonable people. We have one such unreasonable trailblazer with us today. I am so delighted to welcome Subramani Ramachandrappa, alias Subbu, founder of Fermbox Bio, to this podcast. It's a real pleasure to have you with us today, Subbu.
Fatima, thanks for having me here, and also GFI. It's always a pleasure to speak with you guys and your viewers. Happy to contribute the way I can.
Thank you, Subbu. Could you please kick us off telling us a bit about yourself and also your journey so far?
Yeah, so thanks for asking that question, because every time I think of the past, I realize that's what got me here, right? So to start with, I'm a textile engineer. So I have no room, place, or potentially will never get a job in biotech. But I joined Biocon in 99 to help them sell enzymes to the textile industry. And that was my introduction to biotech. And I learned a lot there. It was a very entrepreneurial setup. So there was a lot of freedom. Spent about a year and a half learning many things about enzymes, fermentation, solid state, submerged, which are all now day-to-day words, were very new to me then. And I quit. I quit because I thought it was an entrepreneurial journey that I had a calling for. And then I became a partner to Biocon. So I was able to build my first company called Richcore, which is now Laurus Bio. You may have heard of Laurus Bio in the food protein space. So I built Richcore for almost 15 years, making enzymes, then animal-free proteins for biopharma industry. So you'll be surprised, so many animal-free proteins are being used to make medicines every day. And before the animal-free proteins came, they actually used animal proteins, like we drink milk now, and we're talking about cow-free milk. This happened in biotech many, many years ago in the biopharma space, right? So we were one of the front runners since 2012 to make proteins like transferrin, trypsin, growth factors, which is used for cultivated meat, and albumin since 2012. So in 2017 and 18, you saw this advent of novel proteins, smart proteins. So it was the same science, but now we were thinking of much larger applications. Like initially, like all tech, recombinant protein started with biopharma products, and then we are now cascading towards proteins, food, feed, plastics, what else, right? So that's where the journey started. And since we were already making these products, we started working with multiple food companies all over the world to help them scale because many of the startups were in the lab. So we scaled for more than 150 different processes, maybe 60 odd companies. Many of the launches happened from Richcore here in India. And then we got acquired by Laurus Bio. So Laurus Bio continues to be a CDMO for food proteins along with the other products we made. And then I had a choice to step back and enjoy the exit or to do something which is transformational. So the learnings, having helped some of these companies scale up their product process, I realized food protein needs a very different approach, which is more collaborative, which is more global in nature for manufacturing. And Fermbox now makes materials which are alternates to those that come from plants, animals, or chemistry. And we work with several food companies to help their processes become viable. So our focus is how do we bring viability? So Fermbox, we believe, wants to ferment the future, and food is definitely in our sights.
Forward the future. That's a great word to start with. Thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. Before we dive into the main discussion, I thought we could start with a quick, fun kind of question. Like, obviously, you have done many podcasts, given talks, and also spoken at a plenty of events. But what is that one question that you rarely get asked or you never get asked that you wish someone would have asked you?
About failures, right? So
Yeah.
we always celebrate successes. We celebrate, I would say, two things: failures and exits. Exit as in fun. When you raise funds, you got to create exits, right?
Yeah.
These so failures teach you a lot more, and I think sharing failures at forums would really help without being branded as you failed. Because it's very important for other partners whom you're sharing your knowledge with to understand where you could fail. So that's how we've evolved as people, right? Like today, you and I are speaking based on the failures and successes of all the generations before us, like the technology for it. Similarly, about exits, fundraising is celebrated usually, right? It's big news, it's all over, but there's so few exits. So learning how to build an organization, raise funds, and exit should be taught more, in my opinion.
Yeah, but in line with that, what's the one failure that you want to share with us today? Since you
Oh,
said failures is not
there
talked
are so
about.
many. I can't even rate them. You know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
Like for instance, there was a product we were making, and
Okay.
we kind of knowing what I knew as a non-technical person, I
Mhm.
thought we need a certain scale for viability. Okay,
Okay.
say 30,000 liters would be a viable scale. But then we had this R&D team who said, hey, we could use continuous cell settlers. We could use ways in which we could do more with less, like continuous manufacturing with perfusion technology, which is used for cultivated meat for microbial. And I believed my tech team without applying too much of myself. And we
Mhm.
spent a year trying to build that out. And then we realized that any data that came was like certain gram per liter, but it was one fifth of that. And then we built a small plant, which was one fifth the size of what we should have built because there was an error. Now, just imagine you raised some money and you've taken debt because in India you really can't build all with, so you take debt to build plant. And now I was staring at one fifth the size of a fermenter with five times higher cost of the product we made, right? And you need to come out of it. Now, that failure happened because as an entrepreneur, whether you want to know all the sciences and technologies, even if you're an R&D guy making a clone, you may not know what happens in scale. So it's very important that you ask the right questions. Even if you have high trust in the competency, you should build a system to have it vetted, have an advisory board who can relook at these core assumptions and estimates. And I think I'm seeing the same mistakes happen with several food companies building scale models or cost estimation. So I made this mistake in 2011-12, which did two things for me. I made sure we had a big advisory board. We made the decisions to be very democratic rather than I know this works. So you have
Mhm.
to detach from some of these bigger decisions which would impact your company. That I think was a failure, collective failure, because we could have approached it differently. And that really cost me like 2, 3 years to recover from that and do other stuff. So that's one. Two, I think failures can come depending on your personal expectations, right? If your standards are very high, and as entrepreneurs, we always feel hungry and nothing is enough. So even if we do something really well, I really feel that okay, we failed in these 2, 3 things, but we got lucky. So having that respect for failure is what I think helps. In the long run, that's the only way to build a company.
Yeah, that's a great thing that we just started with. So I think we can start with the conversation, but before that, I just want to put a small disclaimer to our audience because we'll be starting with an assumption that our audience are already familiar with concepts such as precision fermentation, cultivated meat, and any related technologies that we will be talking about. But for those audience who would like to explore further, we have linked few resources in the description that explain the science behind these technologies. With that, I'm happy to ask the first question, Subbu. Based on your experience in developing the sustainable precision fermentation based products, scaling the manufacturing of these products, and also positioning yourself as a facilitator for large scale biomanufacturing, what does it take to transition precision fermentation technologies from lab prototypes to market ready products?
That's a big question. There's a lot of parts to it, so I'll try and explain in parts
Sure.
so that your viewers understand the complexity of it, even if they are from the industry. Firstly, as you know, any biomanufacturing, any product, whether it's healthcare or food or synthetic biology products, etc., there are four parts to going to market. One is the technology itself, right? You have to genetically modify, or you have to find bacteria or microbes or cells which can produce the product that you're trying to do and work with them. So there's a tech piece which is done under the microscope in the lab. And then that translates to what I would say process improvement, where you need to confirm in small fermenters the product, the quality. So there's analytics, there is media and raw material optimization, then there's purification and getting a product, what we call the POC or a viable product in that sense, right? A sample. So that's what I call process development. And post process development is the big piece, which is scaling up. Now you can scale up for two things. One, to confirm that you can make more in a larger scale, right? Or you can improve costs or you can improve quality in larger scale. So there is what I call a transition between um, small scale to large scale. Now this is where most of the companies fail. And this is where you're not able to predict your unit economics. Okay. And then the fourth part is, of course, going to market. Now, going to market means knowing what's the market fit. So we could make almost anything which came from natural sources now through biotech, right? Whether it is food or colors or dyes or anything there is. But is it viable is the question, right? Now, if you want to go through these phases, you need to be able to predict what would happen in the next stage while you're solving for in the current stage of the product development. For instance, if you're going to use some salts for purification, you should know that in large scale, you're going to produce solid waste. But if you look at our current technology development areas, we're using science which was used for developing products for human health, right? Apart from the genetic engineering, CRISPR, and all the other stuff, which is common for everything. All else, process development or manufacturing, we're using equipment, technologies, thought process, which was biopharma. So I have been saying this in many forums that if you want to make food, we have to think like farmers, not like pharmaceutical companies. But the equipment guys who sell to you, or the people who design your plant, or the people you hire for scale up, you're actually sourcing them from biopharma companies who are making insulin or vaccines, or they made cell culture, immunotherapy. If you look at the kind of people who are in the food proteins, most of them came from an existing industry. There's a lot to unlearn. So if you're going to take those same uh, thought process into food manufacturing, it's not going to work. And I think the first step towards making precision fermentation viable is to dumb down the biomanufacturing process, because you really don't need that level of control and handling to be successful other than sterility. And then most of the engineering is still archaic, right? We're still using batch fermentation. We're using media which is coming from corn or wheat. You need to find alternate carbon. You need to recover heat better. You need to use lesser water. We should try to reuse most of the water because these are all costs to the system. So the thinking towards scaling is not going to happen in a lab. It won't even happen on an Excel sheet. So I've seen Excel sheets where people put a straight line on how the costs would, with scale, the costs are going to come down. That's not how biotech works. They are living systems. They get into pressure, the temperature control, the air control, everything changes at scale. So it's very important that in precision fermentation, you are able to build that thought process early on.
Got it. You did mention about the unit process being a failure on the third part of it. Can you just please elaborate a bit more on that?
So my experience, empirical experience, which you will not find in Excel sheets, is for every 8.3 times increase in fermenter volume, your OPEX cost will come down only by 2.5 times. So if you go from say 100 liters to 100,000 liters, right? That's a several times jump. So because you increase scale, you would think your OPEX would come down a whole lot, but it won't come down more than 2.5 times for every 8 times increase in scale, which means there's a certain fixed cost which is going to hold up and it's not going to become a very minuscule fraction because you made bigger fermenter. So the first thought that the industry has is we'll build larger fermenters, our costs will go down. It won't go down proportionally. Number one. Number two, there's a big challenge in raw material. If you're making, say, a milk whey protein or you're making a more lower cost protein, your carbon source that you're using, and if it's coming from agricultural output competing with food and feed, like cornstarch, dextrose, glucose, which is what most companies are using right now because it's easily available, you can sterilize it. And if the cost of raw material or the conversion from the carbon in the raw material to the protein that you want to make is not balanced out in the right economics, your raw material cost will be much higher than your target selling price. Right? If you're buying sugar at $0.50 and you're using a lot of it to produce 1 kilogram of protein, the cost economics needs to balance out. And if you're using a lot of sugar to produce that protein, it's never going to go down because sugar is a commodity, right? Even if you buy large volume, you may get 5% discount, maybe 10% discount. So with scale, the variable cost stays about the same level. It's not going to drop the raw material variable cost. So if you assume you're going to build scale and have high volume, but your raw material cost is like kind of about the same levels, no matter how big a plant you put, you're going to be under pressure for months. Two, just because you think a larger fermenter would give you results, if you go and build 500,000, 100,000 liter fermenters, you have other engineering problems. For example, precision fermentation means precisely fermenting to produce a product of interest, which precision comes with sterilization, right? Because these are most aerobic processes where you need oxygen and you put a lot of sugar and nutrients into the fermenter and you put your bacteria or yeast or microbe or a cell to grow in that environment. Now, just imagine if there's any contamination, then the batch fails. For a moment, step back and you build a 500,000 liter fermenter and it goes bad. You're going to lose all the raw material in that. So people are not seeing that there's a risk to maintain sterility at very large ferment. Third is, how are you going to ensure that you manage the temperature? Because all these living cells have pH, temperature, they're all sensitive, like people are. Like you go to a hot place, you can't perform. You're in a cold place, you can't perform. You need the right temperature to feel, comfortable. And the exothermicity needs to be managed by cooling. So you want to put coils inside these fermenters, you need chillers. So then your cost goes up. And then you have coils inside, which means whenever you sterilize it, it expands and contracts. You may have pinholes, which means there's room for contamination. So you may need a farm. You may need several 200,000 or 100,000 liter fermenters put together like, the alien movie. So you have to think differently, but each plant has to be designed for a different product. The other problem is If you want to be successful in food protein, the plant has to be designed for that product with the least amount of capex and the most efficient downstream equipment, right? Now, if you go to a CDMO, like they're going to have so many other equipment, the cost of those idle equipment also will land up on the product. So it's very difficult to remove that and assume this is going to be a cost of production, right? So at the end of the day, knowing what you want to make, at what scale, what price point, and what engineering innovation you need. I don't hear any sessions anywhere where they're talking about engineering innovations required to make this successful. We hear about continuous fermentation, but continuous fermentation has several challenges, biofilms, the efficiency of media. When it's continuous process, you lose a lot of media. If media is a big cost component, so how is that going to work? Right? So it's very important to factor all these real-time empirical data, and we need success stories. So it would be futile for many groups building many plants and then landing up in a situation where more than half of them fail. Then the confidence in building large-scale plants will be lost.
Got it. But could you share us any success stories from your side, Subbu? Like you have mentioned, a very clear bottlenecks on the scale up side. But is there any success stories like how we can
So
find a solution to this, crack the code of
actually, there
this?
is a solution. Number one, most of the plants being built are standalone plants, right? Like you look at US or wherever, they're considering to build a plant. And they're saying, okay, we're going to have all our utilities, we're going to bring sugar to this place, we're going to ferment it, and we're going to make a product.
Yeah.
Right? Even my last plants at Laurus Bio are standalone plants. So they are like a bio factory, right? You build a factory and whatever you need comes into that factory, you manufacture and you go out, right? So at Fermbox, what we've planned is that when you build a plant, more than 50% of your capex is for utilities like steam, water treatment, like to clean fresh water, to clean up wastewater, then heat management, like air handling, power management. You know what I'm saying? A lot of 50% of our cost is utility. And 65% of our time is spent in managing utilities, making sure that there's no power cut, because the fermenters fail if there's a power cut. You need uninterrupted
Yeah.
power. In countries like India and other regions in Asia, there are power cuts. So you need to
Yeah.
have inverters, backup generators. So you're managing that. Then you have a lot of water every day. You need to now figure out how to treat the water. What do you do with the dead cell mass? You need to dispose it responsibly because they're genetically modified. When I built plants in the past, I was spending time with my team to say, how are we managing our utilities and how are we processing waste to be responsible for our environment as well, right? And the bio piece was just like 25-30%. If you see the team, if you have 100 people in the plant, in fact, 60 people would be involved in utilities and 40 would be involved in the actual biotech, like microbiology or fermentation or downstream. 10 people a shift. The reason this is so is because we are more a utilities company than a biotech company, right? So at Firmbox, we said, hey, why don't we build these plants where we have these utilities? Who are these companies? Sugar mills, paper mills, textile mills, right? Now, these people have utilities. They have power, they have water, they have land, they have environment clearances, and sugar mills also have sugar,
Yeah.
right? In fact, biomass processing plants which want to make ethanol have biomass sugars. It's a renewable sugar. So our strategy is to say, let's co-locate these plants. It's not that it's not done before. In other industries, this has been done. In biotech, in smart proteins, this has not been done before. These are traditional family businesses or large corporations who are in the sugar business or paper business. They're not new age companies, but they are risk averse as well because they don't like to put 100 million, $200 million in an investment with a food company. But if you say, look, if you can build us an infrastructure and allow us to use your utilities which you've already created, then the capex goes down. And then they are experts in managing utilities. So they get a joy of being part as an operating system. And then you help them design, build these plants. So your capex is down, your opex is down. You don't need to bring dry sugar and reconstitute it because the sugar is already produced there. You don't need to run your boilers. The cost of waste treatment is much lower. Cost of power is half. because they are mostly generating their own power from the biomass or from petroleum products or whatever. So end of the day, you have clean energy, you have low cost power, low cost water treatment, low cost water disposal, all environment clearances in place. You can build massive 1, 2, 4, 5 million liter plants by co-locating them and using their side stream. They want to sell sugar, right? You buy it from them, right? They have utilities, you pay for the service. So as a bio company, you focus on bio, create these infrastructures so that your cost of operations comes down. So we enabled one company in Thailand build a plant like this in just 1 year. And now we're working in India, in northeast of India, where we are helping a company produce biomass sugars. And the concept we have is if we help them make those sugars, then we can use those sugars to make food proteins, right? Now, people would argue that, hey, that biomass sugars are expensive. But if I make enzymes for producing biomass sugars closer to this plant, then I open up the door for renewable sugars for proteins, for food or other applications, or even biomass proteins, right? Because you need
Mhm.
cheaper sugar. Sooner or later, food sugars are going to become expensive. You will have now gas to liquid, CO2 to protein or methane to protein. A lot of companies are working on it. It's still a few years away before we can viably see large plants, right? But
Mhm.
what is available to us is biomass sugars. So we are saying co-locate these plants, use biomass sugars, or co-locate them with sugar mills, like in Brazil or in Eastern Europe or in LATAM or in India. There are like few hundred sugar mills. So every plant can actually be a place where you can co-locate biomanufacturing. So in my opinion, success of food proteins, 20% in the lab, 80% in execution of low cost manufacturing. And I think that's what we are doing, speaking to people, co-locating, collaborating, and we say we will fill up the capacity. In fact, everyone should become something like Apple and Foxconn, where you go and bring a new partner to the manufacturing who has most of the capabilities you need and are really good at it, like utilities and management, and have the resources to build the plant and share your profits with them through an IRR model or through a buyback arrangement or whatever. Build a commercial model which works for them so that they get returns for their investment and you have a manufacturing plant which you don't need to dilute and raise money. So we build plants without really raising money to build them. We just don't own the plant. So that's what I think is the way of the future. In fact, smart protein manufacturing will need such huge scale. Just imagine someone succeeds with milk, right? They have to
Yeah.
compete with every cow in India, right?
Yeah.
And that won't happen by one company, one investor, one state. So you'll need different people to come into manufacturing. And you need to share some upside to them when you're successful so that you can have many, many different investors in each region. Imagine if you have 200 sugar mills, you build 200 plants and each of them make milk for you. That's how you can build scale. Unfortunately, when I'm seeing or interacting with the industry, they're still thinking it's my plant. I'm going to build this way. I'm going to raise money. It's the second valley of death because most companies who build tech in the lab and work with CMOs to build products don't have the expertise to put steel on the ground. So, like, we've made so many mistakes building plants that our learning and our team's learning is cannot be replicated from somebody. Maybe in 10 years, there'll be a cookie cutter method to build these plants. But right now, we need success. Success will come by teams which have built and operated these plants, which are low cost, and you unlearn the biopharma for the food.
Got it. Just like you always advocate for a more open and interconnected biotech ecosystem is the way forward.
There's no other way. We is greater than I.
That's a great statement, Subbu. Awesome. You have given us a lot of parts and also the bottlenecks on how we can scale these prototypes into, a large scale products. But my next question is on the other side of it. Like, let's say, for example, a precision fermentation based dairy protein is developed and it's there. What do you see as the next key step in turning that into an actual product? Like, let's say, a dairy protein into a cheese or a yogurt or any other dairy alternatives. Is there anything else you want to share on that?
So this is a very good question. What you're making through precision fermentation is a precise ingredient or a precise protein, right? Is there any argument there? Like if you make whey protein through fermentation, The structure and its behavior is exactly similar to the whey protein from milk. Like insulin from pigs was used in humans. Then we took the gene of a human and put it in a yeast and E. coli, and we were able to produce human insulin, which is exactly similar to the
The
insulin
human
molecule that
insulin.
we produce as humans. So we are doing the same thing that was being done since 1985. So if you say I made a whey protein which performs exactly like isolated whey protein from milk, there's no confusion. It has to work like the other whey protein, right? If it's a pure ingredient. So instead of saying I'm going to make milk, which is a very complex, I'm going to make egg. There are so many amino acids in it. There are so many 50 odd proteins in it. So you can make egg white or the albumin of white. And it naturally initially will become an ingredient. That ingredient becomes a functional ingredient. Like you need frothing, like foaming. So you could use the egg white, it will foam, it's a protein, you can beat it. But it may not have all the nutrient value to say I replaced an egg, right? So you should look at food proteins initial entry as ingredients, functional ingredients, which are exactly identical to what comes in nature. So, for example, to make cheese, if the only ingredient from milk you need is whey protein and you don't need the lactose, you don't need the other amino acids, etc., then when you replace that protein with this, it will behave exactly same. So I don't think it's a problem if the functionality is matched. So somebody who makes functional protein, which is coming from milk or egg, meant in a product company to make butter or to make some cheese or cheese spread, and they need just that ingredient, which is like the major ingredient that they need from milk or egg, they're going to lap it up provided you're cost effective. I don't think food proteins or any synbio products should expect a sustainability premium. Now, when you look at the current scenario, people are trying to educate people, trying to say, here, be aware that this came without an animal or this came without a milk. I think that's the last problem you need to solve. In fact, all the money, investor money, has gone into creating awareness of the potential use. If you made any protein which can compete with naturally available materials, right? You need three things. It should be functionally similar, right? Cost wise, it should be at par or slightly more because you want to capture value of safety or supply chain resilience. Because now you see in US, there was some ban and there were hardly any eggs. Right? Sooner or later, there'll
Yeah.
be avian flu issue or there's a viral issue and people may stop having eggs. The need for smart proteins is not the awareness or the consumption is not going to come slowly and gradually. Trust me. It's going to be a cliff. All of a sudden, the world will need fermentation based proteins. It will come because of a calamity like virus in these sources, which we are not able to deal with or remove easily. It will come through climate shift, where a certain plant or a certain uh, product is not able to be produced. Like take milk, it's so contaminated. So the awareness of contamination will actually push people to say, if I have an alternate which doesn't have antibiotics or hormones, I'm going to buy, provided it's at the affordable cost. Or there is a full geopolitical issue where you want to democratize access to food or protein, it will happen overnight. Like in India, for instance, in south of India, people never ate like flour, like the plain flour, like the baking flour. But then during emergency in 70s, our prime minister sent what we call in India the multi-purpose flour maida to the south of India. And now in Tamil Nadu and in southern states, they're actually making paratas made of multi-purpose flour. It, so people are challenging. Food is culture. We can't. But look at Indian food, right? Tomatoes, chilies, none of them are actually native Indian crops. They came in and we adopted them. So this shift will come with such kind of challenges. There's an emergency, you send multi-purpose flour, and now there's a cuisine. Like everybody in the South eats paratas made of multi-purpose flour. So food shift can happen drastically, suddenly. And that's why the world should work towards making sustainable protein. There are a lot of obituaries already been written, right, about cultivated meat or protein, saying that, oh, will it ever happen? I don't think we should listen to that noise. What should happen is we should take one or two areas and make sure they are profitable. You need a successful case study. Right now, the efforts are very, very divided and broken. Nobody's looking at cohesively doing it together. Like we're in talks with several milk companies saying, hey, let us build one plant. All of you share this and we solve this price problem. But then it's at a time when most of them have raised money and are not able to raise further money even to be part of a consortium. In fact, my call out is for all investors saying, hey, look, instead of each of you trying to solve this, shouldn't you pool in all of you, the investee companies, come together, work with someone who has the ability to design, build a co-located plant, and each of you use 25% of that space and then go and build out larger capacities. Unless we come together to solve this problem, like we did during COVID, this is going to fail. I think COVID is a great example. If we need future resilient food sources, fermentation is the way. If you want to do that, we'll have to cross pollinate ideas and bring this together for successful large scale manufacturing. Smart proteins will work, customers will buy. Price point is what is stopping them. And the shift will happen suddenly, and it's not going to be gradual. So we need to consolidate the knowledge. Like say, take a category, right? You say milk protein. There's 18, 20 companies who did that. So we should consolidate that product there, right? And then we have other protein. What we see is another new company comes up and says, oh, we also will make milk. And then money goes there. Big picture is missing. We're all looking at it in silos, and that should change.
Well, that drastic change seems so scary. I hope you're all prepared when that comes in. Since you mentioned about investors and pooling their resources together, my next question is kind of in line with that. Um, for example, let's say you are starting from scratch today, you're starting a precision fermentation startup today. What would your game plan for funding would look like?
Investors now are wary, right? There is so much that's happened in the last 4, 5 years. It happened too fast, too soon, right? A lot of money is got in. There was a FOMO between them, so people pumped in a lot of money. The valuations were unreasonable, right? Now that actually this is the time of realization for the industry. If there are any investments happening now, it will have more value in terms of valuation and the readiness of the. I think a startup who's trying to do this cannot say, I have some new idea and I'm going to succeed. The first step is to be able to collaborate to benefit from the learnings from other companies which may have tried and failed or who have tried and got to some place. Like at Fermbox, we actually don't try to make the products which 10 guys have tried to make. We actually go to them and say, okay, you left it here. Why don't we take it from here? So I don't need to do the 5 years work they did. And then we say, let's share the value between you and us to the extent that you did and the work that we do, because I have an experience to scale up which you didn't have, or I have access to manufacturing which you may not be able to create. And when we succeed, why don't we share based on the value that we bring per kilo basis or whatever, right? So by collaborating with known or failed projects and seeing why some things have failed, but they knew what they had to solve, right? Like somebody's building a tech and they ran out of money, so they shut down. Now that team, that knowledge is actually invaluable to you. So if I want to start a cultivated meat company, I'm not going to start from primary cell, immortal cell. I'm never going to do that. So like for instance, we are working with Aleph Farms and we are saying, hey, you guys have already done that. Can we help you scale? Right? Because that's the missing piece for them. Why should I create immortal cell from an animal and do the work which so many else did? We should leverage each other's strength. So that's how a new startup should see. Is there something you can add to some knowledge base? Because as a species, we have benefited from previous knowledge. And now we see each company saying, I'm going to make the wheel again. I'm going to make a pot again. Shouldn't you just go and buy a pot or learn from a potter and then see what you can make from it? I think that's the approach.
Got it. My next set of questions was actually going to focus on policy and regulation. I have two questions from that standpoint. The first one is, do you believe India's regulatory policies are evolving to support precision fermentation and cultivated meat sector? And the second question is, what policies or regulations should Indian government prioritize in order to position India as a preferred biomanufacturing location when compared to other global south countries?
I think India has a unique opportunity. I don't think you can compete with India in precision fermentation for a few decades, simply because we're a sugar producing country. We have a deep people base where they work with biopharma or pharmaceutical. Fermentation is there in our system. There's so many people. It's easy to hire for manufacturing, right? Three, the policy does not prevent us from manufacturing these products, right? In fact, the Bio E3 policy, which I think GFI also was part of in the discussion, and I was advisor to DBT, we made sure smart protein is one of the focus area. And they have given out funds to companies like even my last company, like Laurus Bio and few others, to make smart proteins. They've actually started giving out 10, $20 million to people to build biomanufacturing plant. So they're saying while we may take some time to get through the regulatory approvals for use in India, why don't we create these infrastructures and provide it to the countries which are more ahead in regulatory approvals, right? Like Laurus Bio, previously Richcore, we made products and sold from India from 2019. But we didn't sell them in India. We sold it back to the guys who wanted to sell in US, etc., where the approvals were there. So the key is the Indian government is saying we understand smart proteins is something we need, but the first step we want to take is in creating the infrastructure, benefit from becoming a manufacturing hub. Now, why does China benefit in so many things like pharmaceuticals or APIs or many other things, right, including toys? Because they had the infrastructure, they had the competence to build, it was fully depreciated. So you can't compete with an infrastructure which is standing for 10 years by building a new plant, right? Just by financial model that will be cheaper. Now, if you create this infrastructure for the world, how long will it take for regulators when it time is right to move towards using in India? Also, in India, we're very price conscious, right? And we are not early adopters to technologies like this in food. We are going to either shift when it's urgent and it's not available, or we are going to shift when it's really low cost, right? That's but when we shift in huge numbers. Like take mobile adoptions, take Aadhaar card, take Paytm kind of stuff, or take any QR code or digital payment. We just lapped it up. That's what's going to happen to food protein. But for that, we need tremendous scale. It's like 1.4 billion people, and you're not going to sell to 1% of Indians. When you make in India, you need to make for everyone. And when you want to do that, that's a little time away. So regulation will fall in play. And we are all lobbying with together with various departments. We are suggesting that you bring a multidisciplinary ministry together to discuss this regulator. See, in India, education to the regulator is most important, and they will take their time. And I believe they always do the right thing. I have great faith in our regulators that they may be slow, but none of their decisions are sudden. And in about time, in about say 5, maybe 10 years, India will be ready for these products, and by then the regulator will be ready too. But we have to be in engagement. We have to keep them abreast. This is my view, knowing the government, how it works, and being one of their advisors. So I know how they are thinking. They're really wanting to do this.
Awesome. That's so great to know, Subbu. And also, it's so insightful that you have shared this very information to us, to all the questions. Moving forward, we have an interesting part in this podcast, which is where we have posted 4 questions on our GFIdeas India community LinkedIn page. And we asked our community members to vote on the questions that they want to ask you the most. And we have the answers here. We have top 2 questions that they want you to answer. Uh, I think the first one you kind of answered in the conversation that we had so far. Like, what do you think, or how do you think the consumers will respond to the novel food technologies like precision fermentation and cultivated meat once they hit the market and they are on the shelf supermarkets?
Any new product, you need to have two things: availability and convenience. And of course, you should have a need for it, right? That's the big one. The need can come due to sudden shifts, which I mentioned to you. So it will come from either awareness of the problems we are having or non-availability. Like suddenly there is a situation where we don't find these proteins available. That's the need. And then comes convenience. Is it Can I get it in my next door shop? or should I go all the way to Delhi or in one region? Third is it available in the quantity you need? Like if you make a milk protein, which is enough only for one hotel, which is what I'm seeing in some cases, who's going to really bother about it? It should be on every shelf. When you go shopping in one of the supermarkets, you should be able to pick it up. So the scale has to come. So Indian market will shift when there's enough manufacturing, there is a need, and the viability is there. India is going to be super price conscious. If you just focus on price, quality will obviously be better in precision fermentation for an ingredient, and that shift will come. And I think Indian customers usually are underestimated, but we don't just adopt, we adopt and make it our own. Suddenly you'll have Indian cuisine with smart proteins in it, and we'll say it is made in India and it will geotag it also.
That's an interesting answer that you have given us, Subbu. The next question the community wants you answer is if someone is planning to launch a startup in precision fermentation, what your key advice would you offer to them? I think this entire conversation is kind of a key advice that you offer, but what's the one advice that you would give to them?
I feel they should build a good team of advisors to not investors only, right? You need advisors to vet your plan even before you talk to investors, right? And there are a lot of experienced people from the smart protein industry, etc. So they have to build that expertise because entrepreneurs, including myself, we just have optimism. We just feel we'll solve it. We just feel I will do it better. I think in biotech, that's a challenge because the time for you to teach a bug to make something and then being able to make it viably is different from building an app and putting it on the cloud and 100 million downloads which make you rich. That won't happen in biotech. So there's a lot of previous knowledge. So create that advisory group, number one. Number two, there are a lot of companies who have built and failed. Okay, the large companies may not talk to you, but there are a lot of companies which were there and have exited. Find them, reach them, talk to them, learn from them what happened while they made it, or is there something left over on their table? Like at Fermbox, we actively reach out to large companies who may have abandoned projects, and we go and say like, hey, we do all this, so is there anything that it's off the shelf, you're not focusing, can we talk about it, can we license it? Most time they'll be like, yeah, just take this away because the management's changed, the guys who built it have gone, and you may get like really technology much ahead from where you are starting at probably $50,000 or $100,000. So you need to do real work before you start a smart protein business today. Maybe 4 years back, there was no references. Now there are so many companies which have started, which are struggling or which have closed. So see if you can partner. See if you can access tech. Don't get stuck saying, I can do this myself. I don't think this industry can say that at all. We're making food. Food was grown as a community. Same will be holding true for bio manufacturing. We have to build this as a community. So reach out to small companies, companies which have closed, companies which are closing. Reach out to those teams, see if you can hire them, see if they can be your collaborators. That will save you a lot of time. And scaling. Talk to somebody who can scale and work with them. Don't try to scale yourself.
Got it. That's a great point that you have just shared, Subbu. We have actually come to the end of our conversation, but before I let you go, I just have one last question. It's kind of like a standard question that we ask all our guests at the end of this podcast. 10 years down the line, let's say in 2035, if you had to read a front page headline about smart protein in India, what would you hope it for it to be, or what would you expect it for it to be?
Extraterrestrial export of milk from India.
Okay, it's interesting.
Like send it to Mars or send it to another planet because we have like really cool milk protein.
Wow, that's great. I mean, it's inspiring and it's quite possible, it seems like, with the pace that Elon Musk is going on to Mars. I think it's possible. Yeah, awesome. This has been a really insightful and a session completely rich with knowledge that I really absolutely loved. And first of all, I would like to say thank you so much for joining us and for sharing such a wealth of knowledge to us. I am absolutely sure our audience will love it and find it resourceful and insightful. And personally, Subbu, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure talking to you. This is my first podcast, and I really love talking to you.
Thank you for that opportunity as well. And glad to be your first podcast interview candidate. Thank you very much. Thank you, all the viewers. I hope your journey in smart proteins will be successful. And all the best to GFI. You guys are doing a great job.
Yeah, thank you so much, Subbu. To our listeners, whether you're already working in the smart protein space or just starting to explore, I believe this conversation gave you valuable takeaways and tremendous motivation, for it did absolutely for me. And as Subbu rightly mentioned, we can move this sector forward by working together. And a great first step is to be part of a like minded community. If you haven't already, please join GFIdeas India community. It is a space for individuals to connect, collaborate, and discover extraordinary opportunities that can help advance the smart protein goals. You can find the guidelines to join the community in the description box. If you find this episode useful, you know the drill. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a small protein pod episode. And if this is something that resonates with you, that you have some questions to ask to us, or if there's any feedback that you want to share to us, please drop us a comment or write to us at india@gfi.org. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're listening on Spotify, don't forget to follow and turn on notifications so you never miss a new episode. Until then, bye everyone.